Hello, everybody. Welcome to Everybody Matters, our Family and Friends edition. I'm Jill Catherine, the host of our call, and this is our time each month that we get to be here live for you to help answer any questions that you have, to provide support to you through this healing process of your loved one, and also to provide you with some insight, some awareness, some education about this topic, this disease, how it can affect someone who's going through it, how that can, the dynamics and that can play with family and friends. And so we really aim to help provide you with some insight to what it, and some education. You know, we have a number of these family and friends videos. They each have a different topic or theme, and that you're welcome to watch at any point. Like I said, they each have a different topic and theme, and then there's definitely commonalities that you can't help but to talk about, regardless of the topic that's about this disease. But there's certainly different dynamics and aspects that we discuss in each video. So I encourage you to take a look at those through the Facebook page or through the YouTube channel, and see if there's any of those chats that really speak to you. One of the things that I really want to touch on today is, so this is August, right? We're at the beginning of August, but pretty soon we're going to be going back to school. And going back to school is a transition time. And for those who are struggling with this disease, transitions are a very difficult time. Traditionally, it can be a time that's triggering for someone who's going through this. And transition times can also be, even for someone who maybe maybe has a very mild form of disorder. There's some disordered eating, some unhealthy body image. But in times of transition is when that unfortunately could get much more severe. So this transition time of going back to school is a pretty intense one and a critical one, which is why I want to talk about it. So, I think what's helpful always is to, when we talk about this brain disease, is to realize that really what this is about is these deeper core emotional issues around how one is in relationship to their self-image, their self-identity, their self-esteem, the self. It's all about one's relationship to themselves. And those of us who have struggled with this disease have a sense of self that can be heavily influenced by the world outside of them, right? And we tend to be very sensitive human beings, right? And so many of us have characteristics that are pleasing, that are good listeners, empathetic, compassionate, have the ability to adapt in all different environments. So really a lot of positive, personality characteristics, but we also then those characteristics can also prevent us from really having a sense of self that isn't just about the world around us, but a sense of self that's coming from within. That's coming from one's own unique desires and passions and interests, as opposed to a sense of self that's created through, others. Going back to school, right? That time of transition of going back to school is a heightened time of newness, new classes, new campuses, new people, new schedules, new rhythms, new clothes, new everything, right? It's this new time of newness. And there's a lot of energy in that, and it's really exciting. But for those, right, who are struggling with this disease and that sense of self and influence on the outside world, is that there's an activation of fitting in and wanting to be liked, and everything being okay, and having a sense of, social acceptance, and or academic, fitting in academically. So, because it's all new, right? It's going back to school, it's all new. So the anxiety that occurs for someone with this disease, I mean, there's anxiety that happens for anyone that starts something new. So think about yourselves, right? So this disease, it's a human thing. So we're all humans here. So just like yourself, you start something new, you're going to feel a sense of excitement, a little anxiety, anticipating it. But unlike you, if you're struggling with this brain disease, that excitement, yes, but that anxiety can shoot through the roof to ways that it makes one feel overwhelmed. It can make one feel paralyzed just because it's so much for them. So if you think about your level of anxiety, and then, multiply that by 10 times 10, that's how your loved one feels. And that's, for a number of reasons, what's happening with their mind and body connection, what happens when we underfeed our body, how that affects our brain and our body connection. Food is a critical source, not just for the body, but for the brain. And so when we are reducing our food or having a imbalanced intake in relationship to food, it doesn't just affect our weight. It affects our brain, it affects our hormones, it affects our emotions, it affects our chemical imbalances, it affects so many things. Food is just not about how it affects the weight of your body. It affects a number, it's our source of nutrients, of how we need to sustain physically, and our brain is part of that physical sustainability. So thinking of anxiety, and if your friend and loved one who's eating disorder, there's imbalance already happening there. So that anxiety just shoots through the roof. Something new is starting. All the fears, whatever the insecurities are for the person you love, whatever the insecurities are for their self, where they feel insecure within themselves, are going to be heightened. Are they going to be liked? Are they going to fit in? Is everything going to be okay? We can, all these anticipatory questions. That's right there. That is right there. And so, before I do this video chat with you, every week we do a video chat for those in recovery, and we support each other, and really encourage each other in terms of building our sense of self. And one of the participants on the chat, when I was sharing with them how we do this video, she said that one of the things that she talks about with her partner, how her eating disorder is like a secret code of to her emotions of something else is really going on. So if you think about your loved one and they're their eating disorder is highly active, the behaviors, the obsessive thoughts, all of it, that's a code of there's something else going on. The eating disorder is a symptom of something else going on. And that something else that is going on is in relationship for your loved one. It's for them in their relationship to their self, to their sense of who they are, to their self, to how they're thinking, which then creates how they're feeling. But it's all around their sense of self and how they're defining who they are and figuring that out. And it's a very, that can be a very confusing thing. And it's a natural progression of our brain for adolescence. And then we go to college and, our brains are more developed to think critically, and we can start to have more of a really get an understanding of ourselves. But, at young ages, it's very confusing with the world telling us how we need to be, as a young woman, as a young man, how we need to be, or whatever age we are. We're constantly being bombarded on how we need to be. So these are, what is living around the behaviors of your loved one? And I'm speaking broadly because the unique details of your loved one's stories is what's unique to them. I can't fill that in, but I know what lives around and behind and underneath the eating disorder are these deeper questions and about the relationship to the self. And your loved one might not have that awareness that it's about that. I'm sharing it with you. And they will hopefully they will, meaning that means they're going to be working through recovery and healing, because that's what happens is when you're the one who struggles, as you start to recover and heal, you realize what this all was about the relationship to yourself and to your emotions, right? Understand the relationship to yourself and how that intersects with your emotions. So we're just having our video looks like it was cut out here. I'm not sure why. It's always good to refresh the screen, and usually brings it back into the picture. But I'll keep talking here. Hopefully, hopefully it will read. Are we back up and running? Let's see. I think so. We look like we're here. All right. So that was bizarre. Sometimes these things happen. You just never know. So good. I'm glad we're here. Excellent. Excellent. So here's what we want to do. As your loved one goes back to school, here's some things to be mindful of. They might have a spike in their symptoms. And because of the transition time. So first and foremost, talk to them. Ask them before the transition happens, during the transition. Check in with them. Ask them how they're feeling. Ask them what aspects of school or whatever the transition, wherever they are, what's working well for them. Where are they feeling maybe anxious? Ask them that. Claim it, name it. Don't be shy to talk about what it is we might be fearing. Go right there. Ask them. Is there anything you're afraid of? Anything you're worried about? Let's talk about it. And be human. I know it's your job as a parent to have that authority role, and it's an important role to have. But that's the beauty of relationships is in from moment to moment we can put on different hats. And in those moments when you're asking about the anxiety and maybe the fears and the worries of the transition, be human. Meaning share your experience, talk about your anxieties, tell them about your transitions, share what you do to help with your anxieties. Normalize it. Normalize that it is normal to feel anxiety during transitions. And yes, you might not feel the same level as your loved one, but you certainly have felt your own during transitions. Talk about it. Share what your experience has been. So, initiating the conversation about the transition, the things that they're excited about, ask them what they're excited about. Ask them maybe what they're anxious about, right? And then be human. Share your own story, share your own experiences. That's one thing I'd like you to think about. The second thing is be aware and mindful if if behaviors are increasing. Just give a little extra attention. You don't have to be the food police by any means, but just be aware that this is a heightened time. It's a triggering time. And so with that awareness, I encourage you to reach out to, if there is someone part of your treatment team for your loved one that you can get some advice with. Say, we know times of transition are happening. We'd love if you have any suggestions on how we can best support if we see behaviors are happening. Get some, advice. Get some advice from your loved one's treatment team that you want to, if you see there's an increase in behaviors, what do they advise you, how they can empower you to be good support? It's difficult for me in this position because every single person is different to speak in general terms, but I encourage you to reach out to your loved one's treatment team if you have a relationship with them and say, hey, I want to be a really good support. I know this is going to be a triggering time. I'm going to initiate, number one, is the conversation and be human. Number two, I'm going to be mindful if I see an increase in behaviors, and I'd love to know how you'd advise if I do. Right? So, and maybe there's already been conversations with the treatment team about how to manage behaviors and seeing that. So, work the tools that you already given or the suggestions that you've been given, just paying attention. And also, in terms of paying attention to if behaviors are triggered, I really invite you to, because you now have the awareness that transitions are triggering times, that I can understand the fear and the worry if you see those symptoms, for sure. I'd also invite you just to allow yourself to maybe have a sense of much more, or not much more, but just a sense of empathy and understanding and compassion, because you're knowing now that it's not just happening just because this is a triggering time. So as we continue on here, the third thing that I want you to be aware of. So the first is to, initiate the conversation about the transition. So recapping here, the first is to initiate the conversation about the transition, be human, share your story. The second is to pay attention, be aware that this might be a time where symptoms increase. So reach out to the treatment team to get some support and some advice on that. And the third thing that I just want you to consider is knowing, that this is a triggering time is to really, do some self-care, and to, in the sense of sort of preparing, right? So doing some self-care, preparing your family, you as a loved one, um, to do what you need to be prepared if this is a triggering time, right? So giving yourself that permission, knowing that you might need to get some support yourself, um, that this is a transition for you too, because you are in relationship to your loved one. So it's going to be a transition for you as well, because they're going to be going through transition. So it's really important for you to do your own self care, to to get your own support, right? I can't encourage you that enough. How important you taking care of yourself is through this process, and um, and because if we want for you to support your loved one as healthfully and beautifully as you can, your wellness is critically important. So you taking care of yourself through this time of transition is really, really important to their well-being as well. You can't give what you don't have. Um, and so oftentimes families, understandably so, are so worried about their loved one that they don't take care of their own needs, how to fill themselves up, self-care, physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, all of it. It's really important for you to do that, and to fill up your own sense of positivity, to fill in your own well of contentment, of peace, of understanding, of compassion, to find something each day that you can be thankful for. Practicing gratitude habits, really, really important. So I'm sure you didn't tune into this chat thinking that this would be stuff for you. It'd just be about your loved one, but you doing stuff for you is really critical to the support of your loved one. And it's also you're modeling a behavior of what your loved one or your friend is really needing to learn, which is how to care for oneself. I mean, that is the best way that you can teach, and to teach your loved one, without having to be the teacher, is by modeling the behavior. And like I said from in the beginning of this chat, this struggle to the self is at the core of this eating disorder, of not, the core of the self is not knowing who the self is, or struggling to understand who one really is. That's not just about the world, but just one knows who themselves is within themselves. So you practicing self-care and doing what you need to do to keep your true self healthy, a sense of contentment and happiness and peace on a daily basis, is helping them to understand that it's possible, and that that's a lifestyle and a life practice that they're going to need to start learning during their recovery. So that part of your self-care is a really, really important thing. So during this time of transition, we encourage you to have a conversation with them about it before the transition, during the transition. Check in with them. Check in with them about their feelings. Check in with them about, their interests and their passions and their desires, and not just checking in about how are you doing with your food plan. Checking in, how does it feel to be in your new classes? How does it feel to be in the new school? How are you feeling during the non-academic times? What's it like, the social? So you're asking questions more about their life experience, as opposed to their grades and what they look like, and the traditional questions, and then share your story. Be human, speak human. Even as a parent, be human, speak human. Connect with them. Connect with them by being vulnerable and sharing your own story. Second thing to think about during this transition is to be mindful that this can be a time where behaviors increase, which can be a very dangerous thing. So it'd be great to check in with your treatment team there and see if you can get so many tips or suggestions on how they would like you to be support during this time. And then third is do self-care. Model the behavior that you're hoping to that you would want them to treat themselves, to care for themselves. You know, we have to practice what we preach. And if you want your loved one to get over this disease and to heal and be well, it's for them. It's not just feeding their body. That's not what getting over this disease is. It means you got to understand who you are. You got to understand that you're enough. You have to get a sense of esteem and value and purpose, not by what your job title is or what you're doing in the world, but by their own inherent relationship to themselves. And that they need to know that at the most basic level, it doesn't matter what they do in the world or where they go, that they are worthy just because they're alive. That is the core of self that is going to be required for their healing. And if you believe their only sense of worth comes from what they do in the world or status or however you define it, that's going to limit them in their healing, because they really need a sense of worth that comes from within, that's really not about how the world labels them. So your self-care, you're caring for yourself, you having a sense of worth and value and taking care of your needs and well-being, that isn't just to meet the needs of the world, but to care for your own sense of self, is a great role modeling for them. So I wish you the best of luck this month during this, times of transition, and we will see you next month, the second week, for our chat. Thanks for tuning in.